get worse. And that's a great shame. So, I call on elected officials out where I live to take the threat of Donald Trump and his administration very seriously, to remember that they were elected to serve the people, and that, they haven't been doing that well for the last 8 years. But I think a lot of people will be willing to cut them some slack if they could intervene now and derail what is an extremely dangerous situation.
To what extent is there an understanding of the way in which the world has changed as a result of technology and globalization, and that in many ways the genie can't be put back in the bottle? There's lots of talk, of course, about manufacturing and jobs lost. In terms of manufacturing output, really, it's higher than it has been in a long time. The difference is it takes 1/3 of the amount of jobs to do that manufacturing today. To what extent is there an understanding of these fundamental shifts?
I can't speak for other people. I can just speak for myself and how much I observe that being covered and discussed by the news and by public officials. And I don't think it's discussed as much as it should be. I do fear automation. That is how a lot of workers lost their jobs. Trump emphasized outsourcing, but a lot of what's changed the economy over the last 8 years has been, internet shopping, the closure of local stores and malls, and people that used to work there now being unemployed. I think we're going to see the rise of a lot of automated technology that will replace workers. Some of Trump's key allies are Silicon Valley people who have kind of a libertarian philosophy and, don't particularly care about workers. They're just interested in the technological aspect, and it doesn't really have they don't seem to have a moral obligation to think about who this is going to hurt and what's going to replace it. And I think that, this is dangerous. I think there are other policies that would make a lot more sense, including raising the minimum wage and also creating jobs, in this new economy for blue-collar workers, and, eliminating the kind of credentialism that new jobs often require. Now jobs that you didn't need a college degree for a few decades ago, you suddenly need a college degree, and a college degree is suddenly incredibly expensive. And so that leaves a lot of people locked out of the job market. I don't see Trump, really understanding this. I don't think a lot of people understand this, but what everybody does understand is the desperation that this inspires. And whether that desperation can be put to good use, as in, nullifying it and giving people jobs, giving people a good life, giving people the opportunities that they've deserved, and, eliminating their hardship, that would be great. But I think Trump sees this as an opportunity to exploit people's pain and hardship. And if that hardship increases, we've seen throughout history the way people turn cruel when they're suffering, the way people who thought that they would never, ever do something to another human being can be led to do that if their economic situation is dire, if they feel like they can get away with it by law, and if they feel like they're part of a mass sort of mob movement. Human beings are very susceptible to this. It's not a case of are you good or evil, but is the action you're taking good or evil? Are you willing to abide evil? Are you willing to just stand by while other people are going to get hurt? And so, I'll just say right now that if you are going to stand by and watch Trump do the things that he's planning to Mexicans and Muslims, and think that it's not eventually going to happen to you, because you're white or because you're someone who voted for him or supported him, it will happen to you, because the only person that he cares about is himself and his very rich elite backers, and they are going to strip down this country, and you're going to lose even more than you have. So, I have no animosity towards the Trump voters. I obviously don't condone the bigotry and the racism that many have expressed, but, they're my neighbors. They're my fellow people in Missouri, and I see where a lot of them are coming from. And so, I hope that everybody heeds this warning, because things are going to get bad. And as Americans, we need to look out for each other, and we need to look out for our country.
When we look for historical precedent for this kind of dislocation and this kind of reaction, talk about what you see.
Yes. It's interesting if you study libertarian states and a regime knows that it's going to have, fairly absolute power over the people, they often stop being subtle about it. They often start leaving out, what we call tells, so that people can understand what's going on. People who are savvy to these regimes can understand what's going on because they recognize these historical parallels. So when Trump is saying America first, which was a fascist slogan, when his advisors are talking about making the trains run on time, which is associated with Hitler, when they're talking about draining the swamp, which is a phrase that came from Mussolini, when Trump is tweeting Mussolini, when he's tweeting pictures of, Jewish stars next to piles of money, and then you combine that with his actual administration, which includes people who have, supported neo-Nazis, even right-wing, extreme right-wing people like Glenn Beck have come out and said that Steve Bannon is a neo-Nazi. I think, quite honestly, and I don't mean to frighten people, that we need to prepare for the worst. When you start hearing about them making a registry of Muslims, that should make you remember that there was a registry of Jews. And there's this attitude that America is exceptional, that it can't happen here. It can happen anywhere. All the countries that thought that this could never, ever happen, that people would be good, that their government would never betray them like this, they found out the hard way that it can. And so I think it's really important that we confront this very frightening reality. And it's not a fantasy, it's a reality now. He's the president-elect, and soon he will have the power to carry out this. And we need to stop it. We need to stand up for each other. It's not a matter of partisanship at this point. It's not a matter of, getting Hillary into office or something, but just stopping cruelty, stopping sanctioned, violent, anti-constitutional acts that greatly hurt the American public. Because once this gets going, if you look at the history of fascist or authoritarian states, it moves extremely quickly. It seems to be that everything's normal, and then little things creep in, and then once they have power, they will abuse it. And so we also need to look at the institutions that are supposed to keep this in check. An institution like the FBI, which seems to have been compromised. We have Comey releasing his statement before the election, that there was an investigation into Clinton, and then, afterwards admitting that this investigation did not have to do with Clinton and was leading nowhere. We have to kind of wonder why he did that. We have to wonder why the FBI went rogue on Twitter and suddenly, a few days before the election, started releasing all sorts of files about the Clinton, and then also releasing a very flattering file of Fred Trump, Donald Trump's father, calling him a philanthropist. Donald Trump's father was sued for racial discrimination and also participated in a Ku Klux Klan action. That's the sort of thing that the FBI was actually investigating for him, were his racism. That's not the way the FBI presented him. There seems to be, warring factions within some of our institutions. Again, I studied authoritarian states for a long time, you can look for tells. The CIA inexplicably tweeted out a picture of, I think it was Hitler's China, followed up by a little historical anecdote about Hitler's collaboration with Russians. I don't know how to really interpret this. The CIA, of course, is a place where they do this sort of subtle stuff for a living. They're trained to look for it in other states when they're analyzing the social media and data of other countries. They look for signs like this, like what are people actually saying? And so I feel like that, in little small things like that, you can see our institutions releasing some sort of sign. And it's important to try to distinguish whether that sign is an SOS, like a kind of warning, or whether it's saying, we will be complicit in these actions. Because our best bet to stop these horrendous policies from being carried out is for them to be blocked, by organizations that have, in the past served the country. For example, the FBI was the one who, took down that group of men in Kansas, those 3 Trump fans who were planning to blow up that apartment of Somalis. If they're not going to stop those actions, we're in deep trouble. So there really needs to be a congressional investigation into what exactly is going on, into whether the election has been compromised, by Russia, as Lindsey Graham has stated, as John McCain has stated, as many others have stated, particularly given Trump's ties to Russia, the role of Paul Manafort, who has, helped elevate dictators all over the world, but especially in Ukraine in collaboration with Putin. This all sounds like a spy novel. I think it's kind of hard for people to swallow that this could really be happening. But I would never say this unless I was very sincere. And as I said before, I've been studying this for a long time. So I think it's really something that our government should get on investigating. And I would urge citizens to call their representatives. It doesn't matter if you live in a blue state or a red state. Just call because, you want an investigation into potential corruption of Trump, his administration, and this election, and especially foreign interference, and what exactly is happening with our American officials. Because I think if there's public pressure, then maybe people will speak more freely and respond.
And finally, Sarah, is there anything that gives you reason for hope? Anything that gives you cause for optimism, given where we are today?
I'm not hopeful at all about what the administration will do. I know it's going to do terrible things. What gives me hope, and I'd like to say that we should be pragmatic before we're hopeful. We should be mobilized and organized before we're hopeful. But of course, you have to have hope in your heart. And I've studied a lot of terrible regimes, in history and in the present day. And I've seen that when people band together and they do what's right and they stand up for their fellow Americans and they are willing to confront the darkness ahead and work very, very hard, that they've managed to save their country, they've managed to save their countrymen, and they've managed to work and rebuild and make it a better place. America has been in a bad place for a long time. We've had 2 terrible wars. We've had a shattered economy. The situation that allowed this to happen, that allowed Trump to come to power, was not just, he moseyed on in. Like, we were vulnerable to this. So we have a lot of things that we need to fix, but we will be unable to fix them under this present administration. People keep saying, wait until 2018, wait until 2020. I don't think we have that much time to try to mitigate the damage that he's going to do, because it will be extreme and it will move very quickly. So really the time is now. The time to call your representative, to mobilize with your community, to look out for your neighbor, and to think, what kind of person are you? What kind of country are we? What does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be a good citizen? What does it mean to be a patriot? And to me, that means, you stand up for each other. You work for each other. And if your government is doing something that you find morally objectionable, that seems unconstitutional, if your government is not being transparent, if it's, putting open white supremacists as the chief strategist, you should say, yes, this is not normal. This is not American values. And then go from there and, work with your own communities locally, and also try to contact people nationally to share your concerns. If you are concerned about this, and I really think you all should be. It's not partisan. If you're a Republican listening to this, you're just as susceptible to these things as a Democrat. There's really nobody who's immune except for the team of wealthy elites and backers that are with Trump. And I'd add there that his appointment of his family members into, getting clearances and being part of the administration is something you see all over the world in dictatorships. It's just such a flagrant sign that the person in power is not serving the country, but is serving himself and his family, and is abusing executive power in order to accumulate more wealth. And we don't know Trump's financial situation because he never released those tax returns, which was also unprecedented. So these are all concrete things to watch out for. I've been posting about them a lot on my Twitter account, which is Sarah Kendzior on Twitter. So you can go and find a wealth of information if any of this is new to you, which it might be because the media really isn't reporting on it as extensively as I'd hoped they did. And I think it's very important that citizens become informed.
Sarah Kendzior, I thank you so much for spending time with us here on Radio Who, What, Why.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening and joining us here on Radio Who, What, Why. I hope you join us next week for another Radio Who, What, Why podcast. I'm Jeff Schechtman. If you like this podcast, please feel free to share and help others find it by rating and reviewing it on iTunes. You can also support this podcast and all the work we do by going to whowhatwhy.org/donate.